Hi, I'm Michael Stiddle,
And I'm Nick Nanos.
and welcome to Trendline. Nick, we're on day 4 of the federal election, and we already have a surprise, but it's on a provincial level. We had a shocking upset, some would say, in Nova Scotia, the Nova Scotia provincial election. So what the heck happened?
Well, the streak, as the Nanos brothers would say, the streak is dead.
Mm,
Incumbent governments in Canada at the provincial level for all of the elections have either been rewarded with the same or even a stronger mandate. Nova Scotia has broken that streak with the win of the Conservatives. The thing is, the Liberals started off the election ahead, and the race narrowed. And and the Conservatives were able to form a majority government
mm.
last night in Nova Scotia. So I guess all that is there. I don't know if there's such a thing as like an election rabbit's foot for the pandemic. Throw it out the
Right.
window because the streak is dead, and it'll be interesting to see whether the federal streak, I
Mm.
shouldn't say the federal streak, whether the feds will be part of that winning pattern or perhaps an outlier, just like Nova Scotia.
I mean, before this, we've had 3 other elections, BC, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, and the incumbents won majority governments. And I think it was sort of a test on how they handled the pandemic. But in Nova Scotia, it seems like the pandemic wasn't as much of an issue. I mean, are we reading too much of this if we are comparing it to what might happen federally? Is it a fair comparison?
Well, I think it's worth looking at because what happened in Nova Scotia was that the Conservatives won not on the pandemic, but
Hmm.
on healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
They promised more doctors, more investment in healthcare, and it looks like the Liberals were running on their record for the pandemic. And we talked about this before in the podcast, Michael. The pandemic is not enough. It's good, but it's not enough to win any election at this particular point in time. And in Nova Scotia, it looks like voters opted for a party that focused on the future and healthcare
Hmm.
as a main plank.
So healthcare, the major issue in Nova Scotia and federally so far. Why don't we get into the issues that the federal leaders are focused on? Vaccine mandate seems to be the big one this week. Who does that benefit the most, do you think?
Well, the Liberals are trying to talk about the vaccine mandate and mandatory vaccinations as much as possible because they believe that's a wedge issue against the Conservatives. And what the Liberals are trying to do is to portray Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives as not being 100% vaccine. Aaron O'Toole has been fully vaccinated, as has his wife. He's a big supporter of vaccinations. And there was a bit of a kerfuffle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is
I
that
think
too much of an old person's
that
thing? A
that
kerfuffle?
that's a correct
Controversy,
term. Yeah.
perhaps,
Yeah.
related to the announcement that the federal government made just before the election was called last Friday,
Mm.
related to federal workers requiring vaccinations. And the Liberals tried to use that as a issue to attack the Conservatives. And then the Conservatives read the fine print and said, "Hey, hold on, this sounds very familiar, kind of like the Aaron O'Toole plan, and which is promoting vaccination but having rapid tests." And then something was taken off the web by the civil service in
Hmm.
order to provide a clarification. So the Conservatives have claimed that there's been political, what I'll say, meddling of civil servants in the election, and the Liberals are still trying to keep the vaccination as an issue to put the Conservatives on the defensive.
Hmm. And NDP leader Jagmeet Singh also has come out in favor of vaccine mandates, and Green Party leader Annamie Paul has also weighed in on it. So, I mean, we have our first old-fashioned wedge issue of the election. Yeah.
Well, it is a wedge issue, but even in our polling, a majority of conservatives, committed conservative voters, support vaccine mandates. It's just not as strong.
Hmm.
The support for vaccine mandates is not as strong among the conservative supporters compared to Liberals, New Democrats, and those of any of the other parties.
Hmm. Now, going forward, the other sort of major news story of the week is what's happening in Afghanistan, where the Taliban has once again taken control of the country at a shocking pace to many. And Canada's trying to get Afghan nationals who helped out our military forces out, family members, etc. I was thinking about the 2015 election when another major international story broke out, and that was Syrian refugee Alan Kurdi, the 3-year-old boy who was found drowned as his family tried to escape Syria and cross the Mediterranean Sea. Do you see how this issue will sort of overtake the election campaign?
Well, it can have a significant impact. In 2015, that actually helped put a focus on Justin Trudeau and helped define the federal party leaders at that time. And if you remember, Michael, Stephen Harper, the then leader of the Conservatives, in his response to the tragedy, talked about security and the needing to control refugees and immigrations, while Justin Trudeau, the then upstart, I'll call him an upstart at that time because he was an outsider and third, talked about the kind of compassionate element of that and helped define Justin Trudeau and also defined Stephen Harper. So these types of issues, although they're not deciding issues in a campaign, because foreign policy is rarely a deciding issue in the campaign, can help define the party leaders in terms of how they respond. And I was a bit surprised at Aaron O'Toole's response, because on paper, the guy's perfectly positioned to talk about this. He's a former member of the Canadian Armed Forces. He probably has friends that served in Afghanistan. He's a military family, and it would have been a really interesting opportunity for him to engage to Canadians, to define himself and show his compassion, not just for the Afghan interpreters, but also for what's going on in Afghanistan and all the Canadians that have served in Afghanistan. But he hasn't taken that tact. He's dealt with it like another policy issue as opposed to making it a personal issue. So I think a bit of a missed opportunity for Aaron O'Toole on that front.
Now, in terms of your issues tracker in the past, we've gone over this in previous episodes. The environment is always near the top of the list, and the BC wildfires continue to rage in that province. Do you see the environment becoming more important later on?
Yeah, what's interesting is that at least in the latest Nanos issue tracking, that the pandemic, COVID-19, continues to decline. And what we're seeing is jobs in the economy and the environment rising as issues of concern. And they're especially high in the province of British Columbia, which probably explains why Jagmeet Singh in his opening day talked about the environmental crisis that's going on, because British Columbia is a big battleground for the New Democrats. If they're lucky and get good vote splits, they could pick up more seats. And Canadians are increasingly focused on the environment as the pandemic is at least quasi under control at this time.
You mentioned the economy as well. Where does that stand now in terms of being top of mind of Canadians?
It's the second most important issue of concern. But we were talking, when we ask Canadians what would shape the vote in their election, it's at the very top of the list. And maybe that's why Nova Scotia is important. It's clear that running on your mandate, running for a new mandate based on what you did in the past is important, but it's not enough to win. The Canadians are focused on, and voters are focused on the future, whether it's the future of our healthcare system, whether it's the future of our environmental policy, whether it's the future of jobs and the economy and prosperity. So it speaks to, that's what Canadians want to hear from all of the federal parties at this particular point in time.
Nick, as always, thanks very much. And where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Nick, N-I-K Nanos, or if you're interested in lots of stats, visit www.nanos.co.
And I'm also on Twitter at Michael Siddle. For all our election coverage, you can go to ctvnews.ca. We also have lots of more numbers from Nick there. And also please subscribe to my coworker, Rachel Aiello's amazing newsletter, Capital Dispatch. She's renamed it Election Dispatch for the election. It's a really great source of information. Nick, as always, thanks very much.
It was great.